This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to PTBN's NBA Team Podcast. I sound like such a showman when I say that. I'm glad to be back and be able to talk to everybody here at Place to Be Nation. I am joined by my typical co-host, Adam Murray. How you doing, Adam?
Hey, we're back for another season. Yay.
You sound like those shows on CBS that just always get renewed. Well, wasn't Netflix the ones that they were constantly renewing shows even though nobody was watching them because no one knew what the algorithm was?
Yeah, now
they're canceling them left and right because they're launching new shows in its place.
Everybody's getting all angry. Why you cancel my show? Well, you and 5 other people watched it. They just try to hide it from you.
Yeah, fortunately, we haven't had that happen with Place to Be Nation yet. We haven't had too many upstart NBA team podcasts try to steal our thunder, unless you want to count, some of the other ones. But no, we're going to be doing our season previews. We're going to be doing it team by team, putting them together, and we're going to keep it sort of as a nice blend. Try to surprise everybody. We're not going to go by division or conference. We're just going to go with our own random feel and draw of how we feel, who we want to talk about. So it'll be an interesting little snippet of like what we think is going to be happening in the NBA season for each team, and we're going to isolate each different team. We're not going to be doing like categories or anything. We're just going to go one team, focus on them, move on, and just like we did for the off season. So are you excited to do this again, Adam? This is the 5th season for us.
Yep, we are the redshirt seniors now.
The redshirt seniors? So does that mean we were walk-ons when we started?
We just took maybe an injury season. I don't know, but
yeah,
we're redshirt seniors, and now this format we're able to talk about teams as opposed to just next. Mm-hmm. It's good because for those that listen to the wrap ups, we got to get to every player and we got to go really deep, which for us was kind of rare as opposed to our usual gloss over. So who do we got first this year?
I don't know. Let's see. Let's go ahead and hit it.
We, the North. In many ways, we're in a league of our own. One step removed. Just beyond the boundaries. Some would say we're on the outside looking in. But from our perspective, we're on the outside looking within. Because that's where the effort resides. Toughness is found. The aggression is tapped. On the inside. We're far from the east side. Miles from the west side, nowhere near the south side. We are the north side, a territory all our own. And if that makes us outsiders, we're in.
Oh, what a tangled web we have weaved at Toronto in the great north. We the north, but now we have in place of DeMar DeRozan, the mega deal dropped. There was a couple of big moves that happened in free agency, Adam, but one of the most intriguing ones obviously was Kawhi Leonard getting traded to Toronto in exchange for DeRozan. Let's just hit it right at the top. Kawhi Leonard basically being swapped out along with some other players like Jakob Poeltl and Danny Green. Does this make the Toronto Raptors better at the end of the day?
Yes, Kawhi is an upgrade over DeRozan because DeRozan, for what he had the best year of his career last year. However, he can only go so far. And if you're gonna axe Dwayne Casey, and then this is the year LeBron's gone, so you need to make a move. You kind of have to go for it, considering Lowry's 31 or 32 now. So
yeah, and we've got 9 months to talk about what is he going to do in the summer of 2019? Look, we can get to that. Is it a big risk by Masai Ujiri to make that deal, knowing that Kawhi he didn't get basically like a signed extension, knowing when he was going to acquire him? Yeah, it's a risk, but we're not looking into that. We're just looking into the 2018-19 Toronto Raptors. And the thing is, the 2018 Toronto Raptors had the best record in the Eastern Conference,
And then just fell apart against Cleveland as they did every year.
But, playoff woes, that's their thing. Playoff woes.
That's the thing. So, you give up, Poeltl, who was a solid backup piece. You give up DeRozan, your all-star guard, and you get an all-star in return. So, and you get Danny Green as well. So for Toronto, it improves them, and it's if this is their year to go to the finals, they've sort of went all in. Considering, I mentioned how Lowry's old, Ibaka regressed kind of last year, and with his new deal, they're not going to get any better anytime soon. So they really have the tiniest of windows to go through.
We talked last year. A lot of people talked last year about how their bench was one of the best in the league, and it was legitimate. I can just sort of rack up the names. Fred VanVleet, who was a pleasant surprise. They re-signed him to good money, somewhere around $8 million a year, $9 million a year. DeLon Wright, C.J. Miles, who they had signed the previous year, Norman Powell, OG Anunoby started some games, and then he would come off the bench at times. Pascal Siakam. They all were really good beneficiaries of why their bench was so good, including there were some moments too where Kyle Lowry would come off of the bench and mix in with them. But the thing is, I feel like the team is doubling down on the bench being productive, or that supporting cast being productive, because you get rid of Pirtle, which was one piece of it. With DeRozan gone and Leonard there, Leonard is coming off of an injury with his quad. So obviously you want Leonard to start, but if he's a little gimpy and slow to start or rusty, maybe you want to have him come off the bench, and maybe you could, say for example, just play Miles as a starter in his place for the first few minutes, get the Keith Bogans role, and then bring in Leonard. Do you feel like they're sort of relying a little bit more on their depth than they have in the past, or do you feel like the bench is still really, really good?
The bench is really, really good because, like what I mentioned before, they added Daddy Green. Norman Powell, although he disappeared last year, he's still there. And don't forget, this is the East now. And, your top teams on the East are Philly and Boston. So you're going to have a Gordon Hayward or a Tatum, and then a Saric will be your power forward. So you can always move Kawhi to the 4 and play a small ball 4 lineup. So that's something he wasn't able to do in the West because of all the size and talent out there. So this is really, he could be a versatile player down the stretch, and also, he has a work ethic. So just like DeRozan, it's not like, he's going to be lazy, he's going to dog it. It's not like Boogie, he's coming in with baggage.
Well, here's the problem. That's what happened to Kawhi, shockingly, in San Antonio. Now, a lot of that has to deal with personality conflicts and him wanting to be the man, feeling like he was taken for granted and such. But, I don't know if he would be willing to kind of stoop to that low in Toronto and really devalue his free agency.
Well, there's somebody, that was the sort of the double-edged sword. It's like, if you want to get paid, you have to be good this year and show up. And there's, he's never been one to, be, dogging it on the court.
That's true.
Or show up late. He showed up late. He showed up out of condition. He's always there, ready to go, and he's going to outrun everybody. So with the San Antonio thing, I think it was just, he had sort of had enough of the culture clash. But that's the issue that Toronto has is, this team had been together for a couple years now, and let's add a tiny piece. Now all their chemistry is shot. You thought, okay, we're bringing in their assistant coach, we'll promote him.
Nick Nurse.
They love him. They like his different style. He listens to the players. And then now everything you built, you have to start from scratch. And that's sort of what Toronto has to worry about.
It's hard to say. We've seen these situations where assistants come in. We saw with Tyronn Lue in Cleveland. We can name a million other times where the assistant came in and seemed to work a little bit better. I thought Dwayne Casey was a good coach. He had won the Coach of the Year, for God's sakes. Now, some people always make the joke about, when you win Coach of the Year, that means you're going to get fired the next 2 years. But the thing is, he was very successful. If you look at the team stats, very, very balanced team. The only thing they really somewhat struggled in was getting steals and getting rebounds. I think that may have been the motivation behind signing Greg Monroe. I think he can shore up some rebounds for them. I'm not trying to make it out like he's like a missing piece either, but it's a help.
He provides 20 minutes and 6 fouls a rest. So you don't have to move Siakam to the center. Lucas Najera went to Spain. They have no other big man on the roster, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, not many. Obviously with Pirtle being traded for Green as like the secondary part of the Leonard DeRozan trade. That would be the swap out there. They also have a lot of size. Like Anunoby, he's a small forward, but he's kind of got the length of a power forward. Jonas Valanciunas is pretty big. The only issue I have is that Serge Ibaka, I feel like he's already past prime. I think last year may have been the last good year we were going to get out of him.
And that's sort of the hope of, now if they can adjust their system to take into account his declining abilities a bit. But somebody like a Leonard can hide his flaws for a bit. It's just, Valanciunas. It's like, well, you watch him in the playoffs, like, well, he's efficient. He's doing things. Well, no, they hate him. He's terrible. He's the odd man out. And it's just like, Casey he refused to, when the playoffs came, well, I'm going to keep doing what I always do. Well, everybody knows what you're going to do, and you're not going to make a play. You're not going to draw anything up, and it's going to be DeRozan taking a fall away 30-footer. Oh, look, that's exactly what happened at the buzzer.
And the thing is, Leonard was a high usage guy too when he became the man in San Antonio. So I'm not necessarily putting it in that it's going to be different now that a high usage guy like DeRozan is out of the mix, and now you have to rely on maybe more people like Valanciunas to get more touches. I mean, it might not change. It might be a situation, and Kyle Lowry likes to get his too. He had a really, really good year, especially shooting. So it was one of those things where, can you get another good year like that out of Lowry? And there's definitely, like, Adam, like a ticking clock scenario here, because if you look at the free agency, I mean, you're staring down like a player option with Valanciunas. Danny Green's deal is up. Leonard's deal is up. DeLon Wright's a restricted free agent. I mean, there is nothing guaranteed here for this team after 2019.
Well, we could say that about every team. So, since Toronto's the first on our list this season, it seems every team's going to have at least 6 or 7 free agents. Everybody apparently signed a 1-year deal. I don't know why this is the year where everybody's a free agent, but everybody has these questions. And Toronto, this year, they're going to be a top 2 seed.
Okay.
So I don't – the problems will come – can you make the adjustments and can you stay healthy?
Just quick hits. How many wins would you see? Last year they won 59 games.
55.
Yeah, that's the thing. They had the best record in the East, so it's like, well, you're saying 55, that means they're worse. Well, not necessarily. I mean, because the thing is, and everyone knows this who's followed the NBA, is that there's regular season Raptors who are really, really good, and there are postseason Raptors who are extremely weak, mentally weak. And you hope that Leonard, even if he's just here for 1 year, can build that up. But I have to say it is worth the risk. It is worth the risk.
Yeah, you have to go for it. If it backfires, okay, you have to rebuild anyways. Would you have, with DeRozan and Lowry, would they have been better? No, we sort of figured they hit their glass ceiling with that team as it was.
And you're in the tax, so, like, this is it. Like, you're all in. So
that's why you sort of had to make the coaching change, because you got so far.
Yes. DeLon Wright, will we see, because we're doing this in the beginning of the October, are we going to be seeing any kind of maneuvering with restricted free agent? You think he's going to have to sweat it out all season long?
Really, DeLon Wright, you think he's
okay?
He's been on your all disappointment league since. Oh man, this kid DeLon Wright, he's gonna come in, he's gonna be good, and then.
Well, we're going to be talking about this all season, but the thing is, like, with the way that restricted free agency has worked out for a lot of these people in July, in the summer, I think more teams are going to be willing to play hardball with them so that they don't overextend on a restricted free agent if they don't feel like that they have to do it. So.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Good team, really, really good team. Just a change of scenery at the top.
With the first pick in the 2018 NBA Draft, the Phoenix Suns select DeAndre Ayton from Nassau, Bahamas, and the University of Arizona.
Ayton going ahead of Marvin Bagley III, and he is the 9th straight freshman to go #1 overall and the first Arizona Wildcat to be selected with the top overall pick in the draft.
Okay, Adam, the Phoenix Suns. I mean, this is the cellar dweller of the NBA for what, like the last 2 or 3 seasons? Is that fair to say?
They're just horribly, horribly managed. This, you could say, it's the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times, you got a #1 pick, whom by all accounts is one of those game-changing centers, a la an Anthony Davis or
you're talking about DeAndre Ayton out of Arizona.
Yeah, Karl Anthony Towns or Boogie Cousins, a game changer. So you were lucky enough to get him with the #1 pick. However, you then squander every other pick and then trade away all your point guards. And then it's just like, what are you doing, Phoenix? Are you trying to get better or worse? I don't know.
They built that was the first. I don't want to call that the first pillar. The first pillar they actually got, they sort of fell into it. It was when they drafted Devin Booker, and he turned out to be a superstar. They signed him on an extension. Listen, if you want to raise your hand, your interactive hand, and tell me that you disagree, the 5 years, $158 million that's going to kick in after this season's over, I didn't disagree with it. I thought he was worth it.
You have to do it. If he's going to be your franchise player, and he's going to be your Reggie Miller type guy, you sort of have to do it.
And age is on your side there, because I think he's 21, 22 years old.
Yeah, he's 22 or 20. Yeah, 22 now.
Very young.
The thing is, you had so many lottery picks. You had Alex Len, and then, we need to get Tyson Chandler. Then, we got 2 lottery picks. Let's get Marquise Chris and Dragon Bender. Okay, then let's get Josh Jackson.
Yes.
And then Mikal Bridges.
The draft picks were all weird. I mean, now you're mixing up all of them with – now, obviously, they were all under the same GM who's still there, to the shock of many, Ryan McDonough. So you can say that it's all kind of under one brainchild, but they all had their own influences. Like, Mikal Bridges, they just reached up to get him. A lot of people don't like the fit. That was the second lottery pick or first-round pick that they had after they had selected Ayton. But, yeah, you can definitely kind of poo-poo on some of the picks. I think Josh Jackson turned a corner late in the year. So I'm not sure about giving up on him yet. Obviously, the Alex Len era is over. They actually borrowed Elfrid Payton for a year after they made a trade with Orlando. I don't even remember who they gave up in exchange. Who was it?
I think it was just a second-round pick, or it was a flyer.
It didn't work out anyway because Peyton went to the Pelicans. They cut Tyler Ulis. Marquise Chris was bundled with who was the other one that they put in the mix there in order to get Ryan Anderson in that deal?
Knight.
Brandon Knight, who I didn't even think about in my notes because he didn't play all year because he had torn his ACL before the season even started. So, that was just sort of somebody that they're going to have to just write a flyer on in Phoenix. They did get DeAnthony Melton, who looked good in Summer League for the Rockets, so now he's a Sun. We'll see if he can develop as a point guard. I mean, listen.
But the thing is, he's not a true point guard. So here's the thing. Like I said, you have Josh Jackson. He's a 3. Then you draft Mikal Bridges, who's a 3. Then you sign Trevor Ariza, who's a 3. You have Devin Booker.
That was a balloon payment, a 1 year, $15 million deal.
But how are you going to develop a guy if he's a third stringer? Then you have DeAndre Melton, who's a combo guard. Well, you have Devin Booker, who's your starting 2. So if he's going to be your point guard, he has never been a full-time point guard. Oh, well, then you're just what are they building? It's just like they had draft picks just to use, and we don't know what to use. Let's just pick a player.
And here's the one thing about the Ryan Anderson deal I didn't understand, unless Igor Kokoskov, who's the new head coach, just likes how he fits there, is that the thing is that Ryan Anderson was sort of the stick in the mud in Houston when they got Chris Paul, because they wanted to make moves and have some flexibility so they can add another star. But Anderson's contract was in the way. He makes $20 million a year from the summer of 2016 when all those bad deals were signed, and Anderson was one of them. But he does provide 3-point shooting and other kind of offensive pop, but defensively he
provides 3-point shooting, doesn't provide anything on defense, and doesn't provide anything on offense. He's become a glorified Walter McCarty.
Yeah, I mean, but what it is that you did not have that much cap flexibility to make that work. Right now, they are $3 million over the cap. Especially after they, signed Ariza and they bring in Ryan Anderson. Maybe they wanted that winning mentality because you're bringing in 2 Rockets who had played on a team that won a lot of games. But we've seen this before with a lot of teams in different sports, and that never, ever works. The idea of, if I bring a player on a championship team, maybe it can rub off on the young guys. And that very, very rarely works.
No, it doesn't work, and this team is just doomed to have many more seasons as such.
Tyson Chandler, will he get bought out?
No, because
you got Ayton there. I mean, if he looks good early, there's no need to play Chandler anymore.
There's no reason to play him, but why would you cut him? There's nobody to sign. You're just gonna waste, stretch him or cut him. Does he have one? No, he's expiring this year. So
yep.
They're not making the playoffs. So there's no to make a run for it.
Yeah.
So,
and when it comes to their weaknesses and strengths, I mean, they were bad at everything. I mean, it's almost ground zero for them. I mean, Ayton is going to give them a little bit. Ayton is going to give them some kind of improvement in the front court because they couldn't have been any worse. T.J. Warren is still in the mix. I mean, he's a good scorer. I mean, that's just what he is. Dragan Bender, we're still waiting, and I feel like time is sort of running out on him.
Well, time's running out, but it's kind of hard to play the same position as a person drafted next to you, and then it was just a logjam to begin with, don't forget they had Greg Monroe and Alex Len and Chandler and Marquise Chris last year, so...
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a couple of moves left here. Like, even Ariza, I can see him getting moved in February. A scenario like that.
Yeah, or he'll go to a contender, he'll get bought out in the end, or... you'd think the trade was made to, but they're getting why I don't know why he would sign away. I guess just for one more payday.
I'm not sure. The thing too with Booker is that he had some injury issues last year. Now a lot of people would say that was all fluff because they just wanted to shut him down so they didn't injure him, and they were going to like an advanced version of tanking where they were just not playing any of their starters for the last 2 months of the season, which is kind of true. I don't know if Devin Booker was that hurt. So I don't think there's any injury issues with Booker. I'm sure he'll be fresh out the gate. I just hope that him, Jackson, and Ayton can all deliver because there is a lot of potential there. There's
potential, but there's, hopefully this new coach can develop it because the previous regimes haven't been able to, and the GM doesn't really have a stable plan. But that's what we've been saying about Phoenix for a couple years now.
Kokoskov, the first foreign head coach in the NBA, came from Slovenia. He was the head coach for Slovenia, right?
Yes, with Luka Doncic.
Do you expect anything different? I mean, obviously, Earl Watson was a failure. Jay Triano was an interim coach. I mean, do you feel like it's going to be more of the same? Do you think that he's going to bring some freshness?
It couldn't hurt a new style, especially if you have a cornerstone center in there now. So if you're going to have a change, it's better to have it on day one as opposed to having Ayton start practice one way and then all of a sudden, oh, we're changing the scheme on you. So it's better everybody starts on the ground floor and works their way up.
So they have a few pillars that they can build on, but I mean they're still starting from the ground up.
The bombshell of the evening, Paul George to OKC.
It started with a grand welcome party, a celebration of a return to relevancy, a recovery from the contending recession. Last summer, a year after losing Kevin Durant, the Thunder landed Paul George to pair with the reigning MVP Russell Westbrook, and with it restored themselves back to the apparent elites.
It's a chance and an opportunity to play for something special and to ultimately try to win a championship.
It was a second chance for a jilted superstar and new life for a heartbroken franchise. Carmelo Anthony joined a couple months later, and the Thunder had assembled a Just Add Water super team.
Be able to play with those two guys and the rest of the guys we have, it's amazing, man. And I'm looking forward to it, man. It's going to be exciting.
From the beginning of the season, everyone around the team warned against overreactions as they anticipated a bumpy road. But the process came along even slower than anticipated.
They're going to lose their fourth consecutive game and go to 2-5 on the road and a record of 4-7. I don't think anybody foresaw that.
Adam, the OK3 is officially dead. Would you like to give your eulogy on the failures of the Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony version of the Oklahoma City Thunder last year?
Well, what do you mean he couldn't be a power forward in the West? And what do you mean Russell Westbrook still wouldn't pass the ball?
Well, the whole thing seemed rushed. I mean, remember, it was right around media day. It's actually kind of similar to what another team is going through, where it's like, oh, we got to make a move. And so they just looked for, the next best option. Granted to the Knicks, they did find a good one. It was they got Enes Kanter in return, and, he kind of worked out well for the Knicks. And, and I don't want to say they dumped Melo, but it was pretty close to it. And then Melo goes to Oklahoma City. People felt like he could provide for them. He really, really dropped off. He only averaged 16 points a game his it felt like he was sort of wasting a lot of the minutes. His offensive efficiency was awful.
It looks like a team that was just put together on paper, and it was like an NBA. Well, it would work in a video game. They all play in the Olympics together. Why wouldn't it work in real life? Especially the coach who, there's been he's not one to really try. So
you're talking about Billy Donovan?
Yeah, Billy Donovan just looked like you just threw him out there, and they're all like, "Well, what are we doing?" Russell will figure it out.
That was a weird team from the get-go. Like, they were really good on defense, but their offense struggled. They lost a lot of games early. Then they started to sort of find it later in the year when Russell Westbrook kind of went back into his "I'm going to average a triple-double, me first" type of scenario. It just seems like the team. Here's the thing about Russell, like, you get what you get. Like, if he tries to be like the facilitator, I don't feel like the team's any better. So when he's doing the things that he does, when he averages a triple-double, but his usage is super high and he's taking too many shots, some people look at that, oh, you're making the team worse. But in truth, it's really about the same.
No, because he is who he is. He's not going to change, and everybody just sort of has to accept it.
Yeah, I mean, and you're completely locked into him. He's in the supermax level, it's all the way till 2023. So the big question was really with Paul George, especially when they got eliminated by the Jazz after 6 games in the first round. People just thought, oh, well, this is it for PG. He'll go to the Lakers or he'll go to a different team. He re-signed literally like right there on the dotted line, like on midnight with rejoining Westbrook and the Thunder. Were you surprised by that?
Kind of, but not overly shocked, because he was, he said, I'll play out the year and we'll see how it goes. And he's like, I'm having fun here.
And he was good.
He was a good complimentary piece, because that's all you can be in the Russell Westbrook world. He was who he was. He wasn't the same, player he was in Indiana, but like I said, you expect that in Russell's world, but you're having fun. Oklahoma City comes with this crazy money deal for you, so yeah, sure, why not?
I don't know if there's going to be too many changes, because the really only biggest difference you could see from last year's team and this year's squad is that instead of Carmelo Anthony, you get Dennis Schroeder, because what happened is Atlanta took on Melo's contract and bought him out because they had the cap room, but Atlanta was able to unload Dennis Schroeder, who had a really big contract, so now he's in Oklahoma City. So they're still eating a lot of luxury tax there. But you have sort of a different mix. You have a backup point guard who can sort of slide in there and be a scorer in case Russell Westbrook needs to take a break, which is kind of funny because we literally just talked about how Russell needs the ball all the time. But you got him, and then the other one is that they got Nerlens Noel, whose reputation had just gotten terribly sullied by the end of his deal with Dallas, that they basically got him for nothing at like $1.7 million. So after that, really, Abdul Nader, TLC, they got from Philadelphia. Hamidou Diallo, they drafted out of Kentucky. Not really too many changes after that.
Well, a lot of the big difference was you're getting Roberson back this year, who was their defensive
He was injured
guy.
Midway through the season, yeah.
And without him, that team sort of, they fell apart. And, like you'd said, they haven't had a backup point guard since Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, and Raymond Felton did not cut the mustard, even though they did re-sign him as a third string.
They've had assorted garbage. And then, Nerlens Noel, why not? He was productive. Dallas could have been a toxic situation for him because, well, his agent, his ex-agent, overplayed his hand. He got kind of screwed, and then his attitude soured, and he's not going to play, and then now he's going to be on a 1-year prove-it deal, so he's going to be motivated to want to play in theory.
And they put a commitment into Jeremy Grant when they re-signed him. Does that mean that he's going to come off? Is he going to be still coming off the bench, or will he start at the 4 now, which is more of a natural 4 than Melo was, and then you can bring Noel off the bench?
You're not going to start Nerlens.
Okay, then you're starting Jeremy Grant.
You're not going to start him and Steven Adams together.
Okay.
Those two guys I don't think would space the floor enough.
Well, you can't do one of these things where you try to use out like Alex Abrines as a starter, that kind of failed. So you don't want to put that weak link out there on your starting five. You got a good starting five right there, or at least 4 of the starting 5 right there. The other question I kind of wonder is, can you play Westbrook and Schroeder at the same time?
Yeah, there's no reason you couldn't just play Westbrook at the 2, where he plays at the 1 and the 2 and the 3 all by himself.
Mm-hmm.
You could put them both on the court at some times to especially against smaller lineups, because Dennis Schroeder, he's not the best of players, but now that his expectations are lowered as just a backup, yeah, he's serviceable.
I think this is the first year in the history of that franchise without Nick Collison. Is that correct?
I believe he was the last remaining Supersonic.
And he is gone. Kyle Singler got bought out. Will you miss him? I know the Thunder won't. Bad deal. Just a bad deal.
4-year deal over around. Same thing. Like I said, they got Hamidou Diallo. So Terrence Ferguson. Oh well, look good thing they risked getting him last year. Oh, you got a guy who's just like you.
He's the exact same player. Yeah.
Yeah. So Abrines should make a leap, and Adams, he sort of is who he is now. There's no more leaps for him, I think.
Yeah, but he's not a bad player. He averaged 14 and 9 last year, over a block, over a steal. He's just one of those solid defensive centers, but he's got a little bit of offensive punch. I just wish the rebounding would go up. I wish he could be more of that like double-double type of a guy.
Well, in order to be that double-double, you have to have plays drawn out for you, and then that's not going to happen on this team.
They had 48 wins last year, which actually some people saw as like a little bit less than what they thought they were going to have after they acquired Melo, because you got to remember that was the preseason expectations, thinking that Melo was going to be like the missing piece. This one, I think they'll actually probably do better than that. I think they'll probably be about like a 52-win team.
I don't know, because really, did they get better?
Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Like, they just basically swapped out Melo for Schroeder. I think that's kind of an upgrade.
That's just sort of a lateral move, and you still give up some size, even though Melo was who he was. Again, this is your roster. They're not really contending for the top.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't say that
spots.
either. Yeah, I don't think they're going to be like, oh, this is what the Rockets were last year. Like, I don't see that at all.
So it's just like, yeah, they're going to be good, but it's hard to say. It's hard to get excited for a 5 seed.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, it's not the same as Toronto, because Toronto, a lot of those deals expire. This team is locked in for at least 2 years, at the very least. So this is your team for a while. You got to make it work.
Yeah, you have to make it work, and it's going to be kind of hard with that roster the way it's sort of constructed. The issue last year was just a lack of a bench, and they've addressed it this year, but we'll see when playoff time comes.
Last question: will Russell Westbrook average a triple-double for the 3rd season in a row?
Why not?
Okay, I think that's a good one there. That's a good one to wrap it with. All right, Adam, the Detroit Pistons. Central cast is about the same, but we've got a new coach, and because the Stan Van Gundy era is dead, the Dwayne Casey era is in.
I mean, say what you want about Stan. His point was correct. You have to overpay for players to come to your team that aren't the best situations. Everybody wants to play for the championships or the good weather. You don't want to go to Detroit, so you had to, think outside the box, and then you go all in on
Blake Griffin.
That's a good front court right there.
On paper, it is.
On paper,
yeah,
are good. And if Blake Griffin wasn't made out of paper, that would be awesome.
Well, that's the situation. That's the exact risk that you knew you were going to take when you did that. Like, you already knew all this about Blake Griffin. He was injured when he signed the extension with the Clippers. Some people thought that the Clippers were crazy. And then the Clippers sort of agreed with what most of the consensus said, and they wound up turning it around and trading him while his value was high. And the thing that really is the nugget you can't flush down the toilet with Blake Griffin is the fact that when you get to like 2021 and 2022, he'll be making, because of the ascending salary for Supermax, he'll be making somewhere in the northwards of like $40 million. And that's a really, even though the cap will be rising as the years goes along, that's a very, very crippling number for a player that might not be providing the way he used to.
It was, but we're not looking towards the future. We're looking towards now. And, you could say Reggie Jackson was an upgrade for like a day or two until he got injured. And that was the problem, is everybody in Detroit always keeps getting injured. It's just...
Yeah, Reggie only played 45 games. Griffin was acquired in December, but he only played 25 games.
Now you're stuck with this team for a couple years, and everybody's injured. But again, they're not a bad team. You look at the East, this is a team, you could just look at them and be like, well, they're going to be an 8 seed off the bat.
Well, they could have been an 8 seed last year. They weren't that far away. Like, they were 39 and 43, but we've seen even worser make the playoffs as an 8 seed.
The only problem is this team has no bench. Like, there's nobody on the bench I look at and be like, wow, this is a player who's going to be anything.
Well, they didn't unload a lot of guys. Like Anthony Tolliver's gone. James Ennis they sort of borrowed in the middle of the year, and he wound up going. Eric Moreland's gone. But they added a few guys like Zaza Pachulia. Unfortunately, I could see Pachulia as sort of like a starting center if they want to play Drummond at the 4 in case Griffin's out. And then you got Calderon. They drafted Bruce Brown and Kyrie Thomas, and then they signed Glenn Robinson III, which actually I thought was a good deal because you have a team option the year after that.
We have Glenn Robinson, then you have Reggie Bullock, who's a cheap addition as well, or a cheap re-signing. The thing with Detroit is just who's going to be shooting threes on that team. There's nobody. You got, like you said, you got Brown, you got Kennard, and you got Kyrie Thomas. Hopefully one of those guys does something, because it's just you're sort of just throwing shit at the wall with that position. And then another questionable thing is you sign Pachulia and Calderon, and is it like, why are you trying to install a culture change when you don't have young players who need to be sat down with?
Yeah. The other thing we didn't talk about was John Lure, but the problem with Lure is that he's still in this situation where he's been having just chronic knee problems. He had another surgery in the offseason, so he's kind of in the same situation like the Timberwolves have with Nikola Pekovic and the New Orleans Pelicans are having right now with Alexis Zinchenko, where they might just have to get like a what do they call it? Like a hardship waiver or like
medical exemption.
Yeah, a disabled player exemption. So, and that's $5 million, and you're already over the cap because of the Griffin contract, and, Reggie Jackson makes upwards of $17 million a year, and Andre Drummond is your dude. The thing with Drummond is that you thought he was going to make the leap, and it looked like he was getting there at the beginning of last season, and then it sort of I don't want to say fell back to earth, but it felt like he just kind of glided a little bit downwards, when Griffin came in.
But it also takes pressure off him now to do everything down low.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're not, with the addition of Griffin, they're not going to come all of a sudden to be this fast break team. No, they're going to be pretty much who they are, but he doesn't need to. He'll have space now since Griffin can go out. Nobody was afraid of John Lure. Tobias Harris.
Teams are afraid of his salary, but no. But Tobias Harris, he's no longer with the Pistons. He was traded in the Blake deal. He was a really good player for them.
He was a good player, but he was a tweener. So you put him at a 4. He was an undersized 4.
That's right.
So it's just like, well, okay, no, here's the pain for yourself because Tobias isn't going to go down and bang. Like, Blake has no problem going for a rebound. So it should open him up some more, I think.
Here's a good question. Which player on their rookie contract with Detroit is under more pressure to perform, Henry Ellenson or Stanley Johnson?
Well, Stanley Johnson. Henry Ellenson was just, they took a flyer on him because he had fallen to like 20.
Well, that's the thing. He's got team options. Like, they could cut him if they felt like it. Stanley Johnson feels like they're trying to make it work.
Well, he had such promise the first year, then regressed. So it's like, well, what are you? What are you? Who are you? What can you do? Henry Ellenson's just like, try to, learn. And then it's just, okay, have fun in wherever their D-League team is.
I think it's Fort Wayne, huh?
That's the Pacers team.
Okay, that's the Mad Ants, yeah. Whatever, who cares? But the Drive, are they called the Drive?
Grand Rapids, then?
Maybe, somewhere like there, yeah.
So he's sitting in Grand Rapids, and, they're... they are who they are, and this team is locked in, pressed up against the luxury tax. They can't make any moves, so you have to just accept Reggie Jackson for who he is. You have to accept Blake for who he is, and hope they all stay healthy.
A couple of other guys that we didn't really hit on yet. Ish Smith, he's actually in the last year of his contract. He was pretty valuable, especially with Jackson's injury history. They had to play him a lot more as a starter than you would expect. And the other guy was Langston Galloway. They used a mid-level exception on him in order to get him into the mix. I didn't feel like he really delivered as in the same way he did in New Orleans. Do you feel like that there's a little bit of juice left with Galloway?
He's not terrible, but again, it's one of the people you had to overpay to get there.
Mm-hmm. Outside of that, it was typical with the Detroit team. Understand that offensively they just never found it. They were a good 3-point shooting team because that's what in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, like they were a good team. They just didn't take a lot of them. And they weren't a good shot blocking team, even though they have Drummond. Now when you look at Drummond, you're like, how is that possible? But if you watch him actually play, you realize, Drummond's more of like a lateral defender more than he is a vertical defender. So it kind of makes more sense. I just wish with Drummond I could see a little bit more of that physical presence inside.
All we can sort of wrap it up with Detroit is you have Dwayne Casey, who's been known to be able to coach players, and players will play for him. Stan Van just sort of was like, didn't really seem to know what he was doing at all the times.
Mm-hmm.
So they upgraded the coach. So maybe I don't want to say there's hope for this team, but maybe they could just tread water for a year or two.
Well, we're going to find out with Dwayne Casey. Because, he was in Minnesota a decade ago and he got fired. He came into, I don't want to say a good situation in Toronto, but he was given some decent pieces. But he did build them up and make them work. You hope that because he's got a few pieces in Detroit. I don't want to sit there and say he's got to start from scratch in Detroit. Stan Van Gundy did not leave the cupboard bare. He gave him a lot of high-priced players that you're going to have to make work because you can't move them, but they're not exactly chopped liver. Do you think he can make it work?
I don't see why he wouldn't be able to. It's not. Look who else is in the East. You have the Charlottes, the Orlandos, the Atlantas, the Chicagos. They're not going to be really doing much. So by default, you have. You're already on that 8 to 10 cusp right there with Miami, who's also high-priced veterans who can't do much. So it's just figuring out the mix that works, and he's somebody who, again, like you said, was able to mold Toronto into an efficient team.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's give him the benefit of the doubt early on.
Yeah. I'm more interested in Detroit now with Casey there than I was with Stan, but a lot of the drama already happened in December, and it feels like we're still sort of picking up the pieces.
Stephen A. Smith is here. Do you view the Celtics as a clear favorite to win the Eastern Conference?
Without question. I just think I look at their depth, I look at their athleticism, their willingness to defend, their ability to shoot the basketball, and the coaching of Brad Stevens. Combine that all with personalities that obviously get along very, very good together, along with the obvious ascension of Jason Tatum. This dude was special last year, absolutely special. I just look at him, and the combination of him and Jaylen Brown is what does it for me. I know Kyrie's going to be Kyrie when he's healthy. I got a lot of belief in Gordon Hayward. I know that he can play, and the coaching of Brad Stevens can't be questioned. And we see the toughness of a Marcus Smart, Terry Rozier surprised us a little bit. But the key is Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum because of their length at the 2 and the 3 spot. And if necessary, the 4 for Jason Tatum. When you have that kind of length and athleticism and you're willing to defend, you can compete with anybody. Not only do I believe they're the favorites in the East, I believe they are the only team in the entire NBA who can beat the Golden State Warriors.
All right, Adam, are you ready for the future 2018-19 world champions, your Boston Celtics? Is that a good way to introduce them? Is that fair?
Everybody is super high on them.
Well, why the fuck not? You did not play half of the season with Kyrie Irving, and then Irving, I called him Irvin, huh? Like Michael Irvin. And you played the entire season without Gordon Hayward, and you still came a game away from going to the NBA Finals.
Let's just look at it this year. Hayward and Irving are back. Have you ever seen in the NBA a deeper team ever? like that bench is just insanely deep.
Yes. I mean, and the thing is, the experience that they got in the playoffs made them even deeper. I mean, if you want to really dig into the weeds, you got people like Semi Ojeleye and Aaron Baines, who you were able to bring back. Like, those guys all got a lot of playing time, and Terry Rozier was a revelation in the playoffs.
Yeah, Rozier was good, and all of a sudden, in the season before he got injured, Tice was good, and then, like I said, Ojeleye, he had meaningful minutes, and it's just Tatum was a borderline all-star.
Jason Tatum was their best player in the Eastern Conference Finals. End of story. He was better than Horford, and Horford was their anchor. Especially in those first 2 rounds when they played Milwaukee and Philadelphia. But I felt like when they were head-to-head with LeBron, that Tatum was the guy that was really getting it done.
Horford just found the fountain of youth, and everybody, with this overachieving coach and this overachieving team, and then it's just like, oh no, Shane Larkin's in, what the hell? And all of a sudden he's like, well, okay, he's capable. And it's just everybody would just buy in, and you don't know how it works. And you watch this team, and it's like, well, yeah, you have, 3 small forwards, so you're going to be out-rebounded every night.
Yeah.
And this team is the definition of we know who they are.
Yeah, and in our ADHD culture, you always kind of like try to isolate the season, and everyone's going to look at that 7th game where they just couldn't score to save their life against Cleveland. And, there was a lot of reasons for that. There was just a little bit of bad game planning. Marcus Morris took a few too many shots when he thought he had it going, and he didn't. Terry Rozier, I believe, had like a horrible game. Like, he was like 0 for in double digits field goal attempts, right? It was like a horrific kind of game. But you got to think about who they had on the court. And Kyrie Irving, it wasn't – I did it again. Did I just call him Kyrie Irving?
Yes.
Jesus. Uncle Drew, he was on an MVP chase before he got injured with his knee again.
It wasn't got injured. It was sort of like, I could probably play, but I won't be very good.
For the technical details, it was a tension wire that got loose from a previous surgery when he had a detached kneecap 2 seasons prior, and when they cleaned it up, there was more damage than they had anticipated, and Kyrie said, "I'll just not play."
Yeah. Oh, you should be back. You should be back first round. Then, oh, you know what? Take it off. We don't. We made a good run.
Do you think some of that had ulterior motive, that because the contract year was not 2018, it was this season?
Well, it's you want to be healthy for next year. Why go all out? Why, not the cautionary tale, but why go all Isaiah Thomas and then get yourself so injured you're now veterans minimum as opposed to thinking you're a $30 million guy?
It's easy to forget about Gordon Hayward. He was sort of the I mean, Kyrie Irving came after they signed Hayward, but Hayward was the guy where it's like, okay, now we're really going to make the move to try to be elite. And he is a really good player. I mean, he was an all-star player, in Utah. So we haven't really seen anything yet because he was literally injured 10 minutes into the season. How do you think he will fit is really the question, because Jason Tatum sort of plays that 3 position with the long arms and the 3-point shooting and the sneaky athleticism, and Hayward is kind of trying to mosey back in. I didn't even talk about Jaylen Brown, who's an incredibly talented player and a lottery pick that they took. How do you think they'll fit? Because that's a lot of headway at the front court.
I have no idea how it's going to work, because I guess Jaylen Brown's going to be there too. I guess that's what he's learning to do.
That's a weird fit because he started a lot last year.
He's going to be the 2. Gordon Hayward's going to be the 3. And Tatum, he might have to come off the bench because you need Marcus Morris to get the
Are we seeing the end of the Marcus Smart small forward days where they kind of sick him on the 3, or do you think that Brad Stevens will try to mix that in?
He's going to mix and match, and that's what he does. You don't know how he wins or how things work, and it's somehow they find ways to win.
Terry Rozier, do you feel like they're going to make him sweat it out for his restricted free agency, or do you think they can come to a deal before the season begins?
I don't know, because it depends on Irving and what he does, and it's one of those, well, okay, you sign, we can match your deal anyways, and who's going to offer him a ton of money because everybody has point guards now.
And you're already $8 million into the tax with what you have now. I mean, Marcus Smart, you wanted to re-sign him, but there was a little bit of drama there because they thought they had a shot at getting Kawhi Leonard, and there was a lot of silence between Marcus Smart's agent and Boston, because he was restricted free agent. Restricted free agents sort of go last. When the Kawhi deal went down with Toronto, they immediately inked Smart to a deal, which gives the notion that if they were able to make a deal to get Leonard, then Smart basically would have had his restricted free agency rescinded. But he was a valuable player for them, especially on the defensive end.
The problem with Smart, injuries and all, he provided intangibles, and he's, if he wasn't always made of glass, he would be in first-team all-defense because the things he does and the hustle he plays with, it's just like, well, you don't see that. You don't see people who can guard 3 positions. Put him on LeBron. Okay, now you're putting him on Curry, no problem. And he, steals and rebounds, and you accept the non-shooting.
Yeah, it's a Dennis Rodman situation where when you look at the offensive numbers, it's hideous. But when you watch him on the court, you're like, God, if he weren't there for that offensive rebound, if he didn't make that 3, we would have been in a lot of trouble kind of thing.
You live with it and you die with it. And he's one of those people, well, you need that.
Okay. Greg Monroe, will he be missed?
No.
Of all the departures they had, which were really only 3 or 4, Kadeem Allen might actually be the one they missed the most. Allen actually played a decent amount.
Well, he got a few minutes here and there because only due to injuries, and he was forced to start a game.
Yeah, had some defensive talent for sure. Jabari Bird, will he play? There's a lot of legal trouble around him.
Let's just move on from him.
Okay.
Quick answer, no. You have P.J. Dozier and Walt Lemon Jr., who had a 10-day contract with the Pelicans.
Yeah, those are your two-way players, Dozier and Lemon. They got Brad Wanamaker, who, for those once upon a time, he was a Pittsburgh player back in the DeJuan Blair days, and now he's coming from Europe. He's 29 years old. Haven't really seen him, so I can't say what he's like. Robert Williams, really strange, super talented, long arms, big guy, but his motor and his decision making is highly questionable.
Well, it's one of those you miss your flight to Boston, then you oversleep, then you miss practice, and it's just like that's why you fell to them. You have the talent, you're just lazy.
Mm-hmm. And the other ones that you can sort of look into, here's one that maybe since you're in Boston you might know. Daniel Theis, is he going to be ready for the start of the season? Because he tore his Achilles, but he tore his Achilles midway through the season, and that's kind of iffy sometimes.
He should be ready, and I guess he's working on his shooting right now, so he was a pleasant surprise as well. So it seems that everything is... Look, right now everybody has them penciled in with the Golden State Warriors. So it's theirs to lose. They've proven nothing.
And why not?
You have a bunch of players who, they don't know how to play with Hayward now. So they need to fit him in. And I don't want to say that's a bad problem to have, getting an all-star player and working him into the rotation. But Boston, again, they're just going to not... You need to overcome the rebounding issue, which every night they're going to be out-rebounded. So every night...
Yeah, well, the biggest issue that they had last year is that they were a low assist team because Kyrie Irving's not much of a... He's not like a... I wouldn't call him a willing passer. That's just not his priority. He's such a great scorer. He's great at breaking down defenders. Their field goal percentage was pretty bad overall, and they didn't get to the free throw line a lot. But with Hayward coming in, maybe that changes. Slow-paced team, very, very, very young. They were actually 28th, I believe, in the league in experience. That's kind of crazy for a team that almost got to the NBA Finals. And Brad Stevens is one of those guys where, we always talk about coaches, and we always talk about – because you always have that feeling of, oh, man, that coach is sort of holding them back from what they really can do. Brad Stevens is the opposite. Brad's one of those guys where having him makes your team better.
Yep. So I guess we could just, Boston. Are they going to make the finals, yes or no?
Yes. I don't think, unless even with injuries, I think Brad Stevens can still carry them now that LeBron's out of the picture to get them to get them through to the NBA Finals.
It's a three-team race in the East, really, with Philly and Toronto. So figure out to beat those two teams, and you have more talent than both of them, so there's no reason. You just got to learn to.
But I find your trepidation interesting because it's been more than 10 years since the Big Three got together in Boston, and that was the feeling of insta championship. Whereas with this one, this is pretty close to a super team, but I feel that sense of maybe let's put the brakes on a little bit.
Well, don't forget, you're putting your Big Three hopes on a second-year player and a third-year player. So this isn't the Big Three where you're getting all-stars in their prime. These are just young kids who just happen to be so far ahead of the curve right now. It's disgusting.
But you also have 3 very good max players. Very good max players. So that's the caveat.